for peace and prosperity in their own countries and the region. They also sign a landmark deal to start sharing military intelligence. The United States and China impose new tariffs on each other in the latest escalation of their trade war. $125 billion worth of Chinese goods now taxed at 15%, and China now taxing American oil. And on the 80th anniversary of the attack on Poland that started World War II, the president of Germany apologizes to the Polish people, vowing that the victims of that conflict will never be forgotten. It's 4 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to our afternoon newscast. I'm Devin Whiting. President Moon Jae-in is in Thailand for the first leg of a three-nation tour of Southeast Asia. He held a summit today in Bangkok with his Thai counterpart, Prayut Chan-o-cha, discussing various ways to boost bilateral cooperation. Our Park Hee-jun is traveling with the president and joins us now. Hee-jun, what's the latest?
So President Moon and Prime Minister Prayut have agreed to enhance bilateral cooperation in many sectors, and one of the main sectors is technology related to the Fourth Industrial Revolution. South Korea and Thailand will prepare for the Fourth Industrial Revolution together by boosting the two countries' cooperation in future technologies, including biohealth and robotics. Moon says Korea's policies for innovative growth, combined with Thailand's 4.0 policy and Eastern Economic Corridor, will help accelerate the process. Now, for viewers not familiar with the policies, Thailand 4.0 is an economic model that aims to transform the country's economy from one that's dependent on agriculture to one based around innovation and R&D through new growth engines. And the Eastern Economic Corridor is aimed at connecting Thailand's eastern provinces to ASEAN's leading economic zones by 2021. Now, later in the day, President Moon will be attending a bilateral forum with the Prime Minister, and there he will deliver a keynote speech where he's expected to elaborate on this vision for South Korea and Thailand's joint advancement in the Fourth Industrial Revolution era. Now, I'll have more on that later. And during today's summit, the leaders also reaffirmed that they will closely work side to side for the upcoming South Korea-ASEAN Special Summit and the South Korea-Mekong Summit being hosted by Korea. They have also pledged joint efforts to ensure peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula, East Asia, and the world. President Moon shared his vision to establish a peace economy on the Korean Peninsula through denuclearization, and that will hopefully lead to co-prosperity in the East Asia region as a whole. And what's also notable is that South Korea and Thailand signed a General Security of Military Information Agreement, also known as GSOMIA. President Moon says it will allow the two sides to coordinate closely on military and defense-related issues. Devin.
All right, thank you for that. Park Hee-jun joining us live from Bangkok, where the president of South Korea is visiting. Now, it seems North Korea's foreign minister is unlikely to go to this year's UN General Assembly, which will be held in New York later this month. If so, then that means no meeting with his U.S. counterpart. But the regime continues to engage with its ally, China, whose foreign minister is due in Pyongyang this week. Our Kim Yo-sun has this report.
North Korea's top diplomat is likely to skip the UN General Assembly in New York this September, casting doubt over the possible resumption of high-level talks between Pyongyang and Washington. Although there is still room for working-level talks between the two countries, Washington's plan to engage in talks about 3 months since a surprise Panmunjom encounter has been put at risk. The U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, who was in Seoul 2 weeks ago, has called on the regime to come to the negotiating table. Shortly after that message, North Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho slammed his American counterpart as, quote, the die-hard toxin of U.S. diplomacy, while the regime's first Vice Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee also criticized U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Choi warned that the expectations for dialogue with Washington are gradually disappearing. Against this backdrop, the regime is maintaining close ties with China and Russia. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi will visit Pyongyang from Monday to Wednesday to sit down with his North Korean counterpart. It's yet to be seen what message he will bring to the North, especially as Beijing firmly believes Pyongyang and Washington should resolve the denuclearization issue through dialogue, despite China's ongoing trade war with the U.S. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, the leaders of North Korea and the U.S. had promised this summer that talks would start again soon, but that has not happened. To find out why and when they might start up again, our Kan Hyung-woo sat down with Joseph Yoon, the former U.S. Special Representative for North Korea.
Hello, Mr. Joseph Yoon. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for making time to do this interview with us today.
Of course, happy to be here.
So let's get right into the questions. Despite the Moon Kim-Trump DMZ gathering in June, North Korea has been saying some pretty strong words towards South Korea and the U.S. Why do you think this is?
I think there is clearly the feeling in North Korea that they have quite a bit of leverage, bit of bargaining power. And they have the bomb. They also have a delivery mechanism, which is the missiles. So I would imagine they're feeling confident. Yet at the same time, despite these meetings, there have been no substantive easing on what they are concerned with most, which is sanctions. So this is why I think they're coming out aggressive vis-a-vis Washington, aggressive vis-a-vis Seoul, because they want to send a message. We're not getting what you guys promised.
The U.S. says it's ready to talk when the North is ready. North Korea says it's ready for talks and even battles. Will the talks resume anytime soon?
I mean, right now, it really doesn't look like it's going to resume soon, but I have to believe that political interest of both Trump and Kim Jong-un point to the direction of resuming sooner rather than later. Remember, for Trump, he has an election coming up, re-election coming up next year. And so for him, North Korea is, for him, is a foreign policy victory. Kim Jong-un knows the political imperative of Trump, so he's going to try to get maximum leverage out of it.
So going further into what you were just saying, with next year's election in mind, Washington has probably a lot of what-ifs mapped out as far as North Korea's denuclearization process is concerned. What are the people over at the White House thinking?
There are clearly those who are very similar in thinking to Donald Trump, which is that North Korea stopped testing missiles, they've stopped testing nuclear devices, so we are in a decent place. But then there are those who I call true believers, people like Bolton, who say, but we've achieved nothing. There has been no denuclearization, not even a little bit. Rather, they have probably gotten bigger nuclear arsenal. And so I think there is a division, which is why you are hearing mixed messages from Washington.
All right, I think that about wraps it up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Yoon.
Okay, good to be here. Thank you.
In other news, a military source has confirmed that the South Korean military started a project in July to build homegrown stealth drones. The source said the unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAV, could be deployed in combat after 2030, once a budget for them is approved by a council under the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Meanwhile, an official with U.S. Forces Korea, when asked about media reports that America plans to replace its F-16 fighter jets in Korea with F-35s, did not deny it. The F-35s also have stealth capability. The number of remains from the Korean War that have been recovered has dramatically increased thanks to the government's excavation project initiated this year, including the project on Arrowhead Ridge, the site of one of the war's fiercest battles, which is located inside the DMZ. After a month-long hiatus, the ministry says the second half of the excavation project will start today. Seoul's defense ministry said that 457 bone pieces were recovered in the 5 months leading up to July. That's a little more than double the previous year. The ministry asked for public support and participation in collecting DNA samples to identify the remains' origins so that they can be sent to their families. South Korea's National Assembly is holding confirmation hearings for President Moon Jae-in's picks for science minister and head of the country's antitrust watchdog. Rival parties have vowed to closely screen the nominees' competence as well as their ethics. Choi Ki-young, tapped to head the Ministry of Science and IT, was questioned on how he plans to boost the country's industrial competitiveness amid the trade spat with Japan. Cho Sung-wook, nominee to head the Fair Trade Commission, fielded questions on reforming the country's conglomerates. The confirmation hearings are widely seen as a formality since the positions do not require parliamentary approval. This past Sunday, September 1st, marked the 80th anniversary of Germany's invasion of Poland, which started the Second World War. In a ceremony to mark the occasion, the German president apologized for his country's wartime atrocities in Poland, vowing to never forget the victims and their suffering. Our Choi Young has this report.
On Sunday, German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier commemorated the first victims of World War II in Wielun, the city in Poland that was bombed in a surprise attack by Germany, heralding the start of World War II. The German president asked for Poland's forgiveness, speaking in their language.
I bow to victims of the attack in Wielun. I pay tribute to the Polish victims of German tyranny, and I ask for forgiveness.
The war continued for 5 years, and Poland lost almost 1/5 of its population during that period, including 3 million Jewish people. The Polish president said the tragic moment carries a message for the world and not just for his country.
The world suffered this loss to learn a terrifying lesson, a lesson that cost tens of millions of human lives all over the world, a lesson that cost tens of millions of lives of ordinary people, civilians, people not involved in fighting, unarmed people, the biggest sacrifice in human history.
The Polish president described the German president's apology as a form of moral compensation and said facing difficult historical truth has the power to bring forgiveness and the power of building friendships. The German president asked again for forgiveness for atrocities committed by his country in Poland as he took part in the main event held in Poland's capital, Warsaw. U.S. President Donald Trump had originally been scheduled to take part in the event but canceled his visit due to Hurricane Dorian. Vice President Mike Pence attended instead and spoke on his behalf. He said the Polish people never lost hope and never gave in to despair. Choi Young, Arirang News.
The world's two biggest economies, as of Sunday, have imposed new tariffs on each other. The U.S. on Chinese consumer goods and China on American oil. There's still hope, though, that talks will resume later this month. Lee Seung-jae has the details.
The U.S. has begun imposing its additional 15% tariffs on more than $125 billion of Chinese imports, including smart speakers, Bluetooth headphones, and footwear. In return, China has also begun imposing a 5% tariff on U.S. crude oil on Sunday, the first time U.S. oil has been targeted since the two countries began their trade war more than a year ago. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Sunday, President Trump said the U.S. will be giving some of the money from the tariffs to U.S. farmers, who he says have been targeted unfairly by China.
We're taking in tens of billions of dollars. We're giving some of the money to the farmers. I'm making the farmers more than whole. The farmers are doing better than if China, frankly, were buying. I'm taking a piece of the massive amount of tariffs. We're giving them to the farmers who have been targeted unfairly by China.
Despite the two nations imposing tariffs on each other's goods, Washington and Beijing will continue their trade talks and will meet in September.
We are talking to China. The meeting is still on, as you know, in September. That hasn't changed. They haven't changed it. We haven't. We'll see what happens. But we can't allow China to rip us off anymore as a country. We can't allow China to take $500 billion a year out of our country. We can't do that.
Beijing has pressed Washington to call off the tariff increase, but said last week that trade talks were still being discussed between the two. The extra tariffs will further harm Washington-Beijing ties, already strained by U.S. freedom of navigation exercises near Chinese-occupied islands in the disputed South China Sea, and U.S. support for self-ruled and democratic Taiwan, which China claims as its own. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea is on track towards removing Japan from its whitelist of trusted trading partners. According to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, the government plans to implement a change to the nation's export control system that would drop Tokyo this month to the newly created A2 group of countries. The ministry says it'll complete a 20-day public opinion gathering process on Tuesday, a necessary step before it can make a public announcement of the revision. While it did not disclose the number of people who participated in this process, the related post on the ministry's website received more than 2,000 views. The Korean automakers Hyundai Motor and its affiliate Kia Motors have sold more cars in Western Europe than Japanese automakers Toyota and Honda combined for each of the last 7 years, and that trend continued in the first half of this year. According to Hyundai and Kia, they sold 550,000 cars in the January to June period this year, 70,000 units more than Toyota and Honda. Hyundai and Kia have seen a gradual increase in their European sales since 2012. Last year's sales reaching the 1 million unit milestone. Hyundai and Kia together make up roughly 6% of all automobiles sold in Western Europe. It's time now for an in-depth look at the global markets this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Hwang Se-eun, Research Fellow at the Korea Capital Market Institute. Dr. Hwang, thank you for coming on today.
Good to be here with you today.
Now, last Friday on Wall Street, stocks were mixed. Some positive feelings about the U.S.-China trade talks, but also some diverging signals from the American economy. Korean stocks, meanwhile, moving a little higher today. What's the story?
In Wall Street, stocks ended a little changed Friday as investors took a breather from a wild month of trading. Investors are pausing and waiting to see what next month and next week holds. The major indexes posted their worst monthly performance since May. The Dow fell 1.7 in August, while the S&P 500 lost 1.8%. The Nasdaq pulled back 2.6%. U.S.-China trade relations intensified in August, rattling investors. Investor sentiment was also dented in August as economic data pointed to a global growth slowdown, ramping up concerns of possible recession. Asian stocks fell after the latest tariffs kicked in on Chinese goods and data showed further weakness in China's manufacturing sector. A drop in the official China Purchasing Managers Index on Saturday highlighted the pressure facing the world's second-largest economy from weaker demand and escalating trade tensions with the U.S. Japan's Nikkei dropped 0.41%, Hong Kong's Hang Seng lost 0.67%, while Kospi gained 0.07%.
You mentioned the U.S.-China tariffs coming into effect over the weekend. Tell us about where things stand now there.
The United States began imposing 15% tariffs on a variety of Chinese goods on Sunday, including footwear, smartwatches, and flat-panel televisions, as China began imposing new duties on U.S. crude, the latest escalation in bruising trade war. The levies on food, clothing, lawnmowers, and thousands of other made-in-China products come as the president prepares to tax nearly everything China ships to America. The move will bring average tariffs on Chinese imports to 21.2%, up from only 3.1% when Mr. Trump came into office. China has responded by raising barriers to American companies and their products. China started to impose additional tariffs on some of the U.S. goods on a $75 billion target list. President Trump's trade war with China entered new territory on Sunday as his next round of tariffs took effect, changing the rules of trade in ways that have no recent historic precedent and driving the world's two largest economies further apart.
Right. Well, this week, the Bank of Korea will be releasing figures on the trade balance for July, a bunch of other numbers too, second quarter growth and so on. What's on your radar this week?
The Bank of Korea will release the July balance of payments on Thursday. South Korea's current account posted a slight deficit in April on the back of dividends paid to foreign stock investors amid a shrinking trade surplus. Current account turned positive in May and stayed positive in June. Again, it is expected to stay positive in August as well. The Statistics Korea will release August's Consumer Price Index on Tuesday. The CPI in July was 104.5, increasing 0.6% over the previous year. The CPI has stayed below 1% since year 2015. August CPI is expected to be below 1%. The core inflation without food and energy sectors, is expected to be below 1% in August as well. The U.S. jobs report will be released on Friday. The report is projected to show non-farm payrolls rose by 165,000 in August, slightly above the month prior. Estimates of the employment situation are for unemployment to be steady at 3.7% and the average hourly earnings rate of increase to slow to 3.0%.
All right, Dr. Huang, that's where we'll have to leave it for now. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you very much.
South Korean tech giant Samsung has been voted the top foreign brand among American millennials. In a survey by the U.S.-based branding agency Musulvania, Samsung came in 6th place after 5 American brands: Amazon, Apple, Nike, Walmart, and Target. Samsung was the only Asian brand in the top 10, topping other popular brands like Google, Disney, and Starbucks. The next highest-ranked Asian brand was Japan's Nintendo at 12th place. The survey covered 1,000 Americans between the ages of 19 and 39. An average of just 10.4 South Korean businesses abroad returned to South Korea each year from 2014 to 2018. This is far below the 482 U.S. businesses that returned home each year, according to the U-Turn Business Data Report collected by the Federation of Korean Industries. The report says the rise in labor costs in China and consumers' preference for U.S.-made products, as well as corporate tax exemptions, help bring a lot more businesses back to the U.S. South Korean businesses that come home also receive a corporate tax exemption for 5 years, but according to the report, they are not doing so well when they come back because the business environment is not improving. South Korea is giving a special welcome this week to tourists from Vietnam. It's the 2019 Vietnam Welcome Week, starting today, as part of strengthening ties with countries under Korea's new Southern policy. Visitors from Vietnam will find welcome booths at the airports, travel information in their language, gifts, and discounts of up to 40%. Vietnam's an increasingly important source of tourism for South Korea. Over the past 5 years, tourist arrivals have risen by a staggering 34% annually. Already this year, South Korea has welcomed an estimated 400,000 Vietnamese. 3 years ago, an artificial intelligence program called AlphaGo, designed to play the game Go, famously beat one of the world's best players, Lee Se-do, in a globally televised showdown. Now, legal professionals in South Korea are using AI to analyze legal documents using locally developed software called Alpha Law. Oh Soo-young reports.
Korea's first ever showdown between human lawyers and artificial intelligence took place in downtown Seoul, with the AI Alpha Law teams mostly claiming victory. Lawyers teamed up with an AI legal analysis software to beat their human-only contenders in analysing an employment contract. They had to identify crucial facts and areas for improvement in the document. It's not a test of human versus artificial intelligence. It's a test of whether AI can become a powerful tool to resolve various legal complexities and increase the quality of decision-making. Alpha Law teams claimed the top 3 spots, scoring 100% in all the standardized questions.
Where there is data, there's much room for automation. This also applies in law, where the costs of legal consultation are high, but lawyers are also overwhelmed with numerous cases and documents. We hope to expand this model to other forms of common contracts used in everyday life, like in real estate.
A new venture in southern Seoul is already developing further uses for AI in order to help expand public access to quality legal assistance and consultations free of charge.
By using AI algorithms and natural language processing, we offer a platform service that is as good as face-to-face consultations with a lawyer on legal contracts you need in everyday life.
Not only does it provide legal templates for contracts, its new service launching next year will provide recommendations as well, cater to the user's need.
In the past, automated template systems only helped fill in the blanks based on the user's request, but our new AI service will make recommendations on the type of contracts that they need if they aren't sure which to fill out. As our program progresses, we hope to also highlight legal clauses, protection of rights, obligations, and other important details that the client may never have thought of.
The global market of legal tech has seen explosive growth in recent years, with more than $220 million being invested into the sector last year. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
And that's all for this hour. Thank you for watching.